Hello friends, welcome to Alkem IAS. This is Dr. Rajesh Kumar Mohan and we are continuing with our Indian Express Demystified series. So let's start with today's Indian Express newspaper. First of all, first of all about me, I am Dr. Rajesh Kumar Mohan. I have done my MBBS from Government Medical College, Chandigarh. I have worked as AMO in Indian Ordnance Factory Health Services. This is my fifth attempt, written mains 4 times, and I have cleared mains 2019-20. So let's start with today's newspaper. First news is that S. Shankar, External Affairs Minister, is planning a visit to US, where the mission would be to ensure that enough supplies of vaccines are ensured for India and its neighbors. In fact, in Bangladesh, foreign minister has also talked to India's external affairs minister. So right now what we are experiencing is that US is having an excess stock of vaccines. In fact, AstraZeneca vaccine, which is right now called as Covishield in India, has in fact being stored there in huge quantities, even though it is not given approval by their FDA, but they have huge quantities of this vaccine. At the same time, Johnson & Johnson vaccine is also available. There in US, significant population has been covered with vaccines, so they are planning to give vaccines to their friendly nations. In fact, US President Joe Biden has indicated something of this sort to the world counterparts, and the aim of S. Jaishankar's visit is to ensure that in the next few weeks some proper agreements are made so that vaccine supply is ensured to the country, as we know that right now we are facing a vaccine shortage. So this is the first article. Next is doctrine of impossibility. So uh, what is this doctrine of impossibility? Right now what we are witnessing is that high courts, especially Allahabad High Court and say Madras High Court, they have used very harsh words for the executive, and they have passed statements which are not based on data, and even have passed some orders which are very difficult to implement without taking into account the ground realities of the situation, without taking into account about the availability of resources, and the timeline is very short. And so unscientific orders are being passed from various high courts, which are not based on data and availability of resources. So Supreme Court has said that this doctrine of impossibility, that those things which are impossible to do, that even applies to judiciary also, because judiciary cannot pass certain orders which are impossible to implement. So Supreme Court has used this doctrine in order to stay the order of Allahabad High Court. Allahabad High Court has directed state government of UP to do certain very to take certain executive actions which were whose time limit was very short, and the amount of resources that the state is having are not enough to supplement it. This has to be seen in the wider context of high courts using various terms like genocide for oxygen related death, then calling EC, Election Commission of India, as responsible for the murder of this citizen. So also very harsh words have been used by various high courts. Because of that, this clearly is being told by many people as something we can say as judicial overreach. So in line with this, Supreme Court is trying to restrain these high courts to not go above their remit, and in a situation like pandemic where resources are deficient, we have to prioritize the resources on the basis of data. So passing impossible orders would not be right. So this is the second article. Next is the editorial. We are having the editorial of a new truce. So as we know that right now Israel and Hamas are fighting. are fighting at an intense scale, and in fact, it is an undeclared sort of war also. Huge amounts of munitions are used from each other side in order to inflict damage on each other. So right now, what happened recently was Egypt mediated a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, so that the violence stops. After an 11-day fighting, now the fighting has stopped because of the ceasefire that is being mediated by Egypt. And in fact, Egypt has in previous instances also been very forthcoming in order to resolve the conflict between Israel and Hamas and say Palestinian authorities, other Palestinian authorities. But the main reason behind this truce has been the shift in Biden administration position. So uh, for this, we have to take into account what is the US-Israel relationships. US-Israel relationships are very special, and most of the time, US supports Israel in all its activity. In fact, when Joe Biden became president, he continued with the earlier policy of supporting Israel in its activity. But right now, what is happening is that this new group in Democrats is pressurizing the Biden administration to take a fairly handed approach towards dealing with Israel and Palestine. So because of that, Joe Biden administration asked Prime Minister Netanyahu of the Israel to tone down, so to stop the fighting, because it was certainly an unequal fight between Israel and Hamas. Israel having very well functioning military, well functioning weapons. So this was not an equal fight between their two groups. So that is the case. Now we can take a clue from the history that from 1993 Oslo Accords onwards, now there is a consensus that a two-state solution is the only way forward for this one of the largest continuing conflict in the world arena between Israel and Palestine. So in this regard, the role of various superpowers like US, Russia is also there. Also some groupings like Quartet, Middle East Quartet, is also very important. So what is this Middle East Quartet? So it's a grouping of four institutions. It is European Union, UN, so EU, UN, then US and Russia. So these are two big parts, and these are two big organizations. These quartets are trying to exert their influence in order to reduce the conflict between the in the Middle East region. So this is the editorial was about. Next is this is Sushil Kumar Modi. He's writing about how the recent judgment, 3-2 judgment with regard to 102nd constitutional amendment of the constitution can have repercussions with regard to the center-state relations, federalism, and the reservation policy. So, what is this 102nd constitutional amendment about? This is about giving constitutional status to National Commission for Backward Classes. So, NCBC constitutional status was given through 102nd constitutional amendment. So now this commission has become on par with the National Commission for Scheduled Caste and National Commission for Scheduled Tribes. So, but the issue is that now what is happening is that generally, if we say National Commission for Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes, we see that what happens is that how the list for Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe is made. First of all, a president notifies the list, and if of a state specific scheduled caste, and through a simple executive order, and if any amendment has to be done by into it, it has to be done by Parliament. So with regard to the socially and economically backward classes, what we can call as OBC or other backward classes. So what has been the position earlier was that it was the state-led process initially. If we see 1920 onwards, Madras state, which is present Tamil Nadu state, it used to give OBC reservation, and it was the state governments who were given it. In Champakai Dorai Rajan case, this policy was struck down. So first constitutional amendment was brought, in which amendment was introduced in Article 15, enabling the states to make lists for the socially and economically backward classes. So that was the context. So later on, what happened? So all these state governments went for giving other backward reservation on the basis of recommendations of various commissions. But the central government was not having this OBC reservation policy. It all changed with this Mandal Commission report. Mandal Commission report gave a report that at the union level, now a reservation will be given to OBCs. For that, in that regard, what happened? This decision was implemented and it went to Supreme Court. And in Indira Sani case, certain guidelines were made. And after these guidelines were implemented, central list of OBC used to be prepared from that moment. So at present situation is that we are having a central OBC list and a state OBC list, and state governments are providing reservation and positive discrimination for their state specific jobs, and the central government is doing it for the union government jobs. So that is the present space. Now, what is going to happen? Now, what the Supreme Court has interpreted this National Commission for Backward Caste is that now it would not be possible for the state governments to have their separate OBC list. It would be the union government who would be deciding through presidential notification what constitutes socially and economically backward castes. However, this according to the author, this goes against how the very purpose for the constitutional amendment. How was it about? In fact, when there are discussions for this constitutional amendment were happening in the Parliamentary Standing Committee, so these the law ministry has categorically said that this does not mean that state government's power to give a positive discrimination to their specific socially and economically backward caste would go away. Rather, it would be the old system continuing. However, the Supreme Court in 3-2 judgment has said that now it would be the union government who will be deciding. So in this regard, the union government has filed a review petition in the Supreme Court. However, the author is also saying that in case the review petition is not being taken up, then the government is open to going for an amendment in the constitution, so that both state governments and central governments are allowed to make the list of socially and economically backward castes. So this is this article about. So let's move on to the next article. So what recently has happened is that union government has hiked the fertilizer subsidy for DAP. So what is a DAP? DAP, it is a fertilizer. So the full form of DAP is diammonium phosphate. Diammonium phosphate. So it is a phosphate fertilizer. So how the subsidy works in case of India is we have a urea subsidy, and one is nutrient based subsidy. So the urea subsidy is that the central government will decide what would be the maximum retail price of the urea fertilizer, and whatever the difference between cost of production, profit, and the MRP, the subsidy would be given by the government to these fertilizer manufacturers. However, the nutrient-based subsidy works in a different way. It works that the central government will have a fixed subsidy would be given based on the nutrients, based on N, P, K, S. So based on these nutrients, a fixed subsidy would be given, which would be announced by the union government as per the time. However, there would be no cap on MRPs. Maximum retail price of these fertilizers would not be capped, and it would be up to the state, these manufacturing entities to set up the MRP. So MRP is variable, but the subsidy is fixed here. However, in urea case, the MRP is fixed and subsidy is variable. It would keep on changing. So this is the change. So why there is a debate of DAP right now? What is happening is that the international prices for the raw materials for DAP has been increased. So because of that, there are chances that the MRP, in fact, there are plans by these manufacturing units to increase the MRP of their various DAP fertilizers. However, because elections were there, plus at the same time there were recently farmers' protests were there. So because of that, even IFFCO has decided to increase the fertilizer prices of their DAP. So there was a fear among the government that this can result in a second farmer protest. Therefore, in order to keep the MRP at the previous level, the union government has decided that now phosphorus content, under the nutrient-based subsidy, the subsidy given to the phosphorus component would be increased, and this increase has been up to 137%, and this has ensured that the MRP of DAP would remain as it used to be previously. So this is this decision with regard to the fertilizer subsidy. Other fertilizers are not impacted because they have more provision of more N, more SK. Phosphorus is very high in diammonium phosphate fertilizer. So that is the news article about. Next is government versus WhatsApp. So now Ministry of IT has written to WhatsApp that it may take legal actions if it continue with its privacy policy. So what is this issue about the privacy policy? WhatsApp has come with its privacy policy that in case of business accounts, so which are very much there, so there would be a provision so that the WhatsApp and Facebook, which is a parent company, Facebook would be able to do advertising on these business accounts. However, this goes against privacy, but WhatsApp has clarified that it's personal family to family and friends messages are end-to-end encrypted. So there would be no violation of privacy as such, but business account, this would be issue. But the government is saying that no, it goes against the privacy of the individuals, and it is taking the personal data of the citizens of India in a very casual way. So this goes against how at the same time we are having a draft personal data bill being passed. So before that passage, the WhatsApp is going with the implementation of this privacy, because that's why the government is saying that this kind of privacy policy goes against the India's constitutional scheme of things, and the union government may decide to take some legal actions. At the same time, there are some these are there. So with this, I think that today's newspaper comes to an end. So in the end, I would like to say thank you so much for listening to us. Continue liking, commenting on the videos. We will continue over these Indian Express Demystified series. Thank you so much.